11th of July 2024. New charges were laid against the Destiny Church youth leader accused of sexually assaulting young boys. They're from a third complainant and now bring the total amount of charges against the man from 6 up to 14. But before we go into this new development, let's take a look at whether this is an isolated incident or whether a pattern is beginning to reveal itself. To begin, we'll need to travel back 14 years to 2010.
Hallelujah. Welcome. This is Catch Fire International Ministries. I'm your host for tonight, Pastor Joshua. And if you want to go get get a pen and paper, let's come around the Word of God and really dive in. We're going to rip open the Word. So if you want to get
This is Pastor Joshua Edmonds, and this is his sister, Rebecca Noble. In 2010, when Joshua was 29 and Rebecca was in her early 30s, they were both criminally charged with sexually assaulting foster children who were living in their parents' home. It was reported that the parents were both well aware of this situation and allowed their adult children to continue the sexual abuse of their foster children for a long period of time. Who were these parents? Their names were Lee and Robin Edmonds, now Robin Coughlin, and at that time, they were the senior pastors of the New Plymouth Destiny Church. As was revealed in a 2010 Campbell Live investigation, there were many in the New Plymouth Destiny Church who knew that the pastors' adult children were regularly having sex with the foster children. But nobody did anything about it, saying they were encouraged to look the other way. And as a result, no one in church leadership contacted SIFs or the police. Here's a short excerpt from Campbell Live from March 2010.
Joshua's sister, Rebecca, was allegedly having sex with a foster child, this time a 14-year-old boy.
The pastor's daughter was seeing and had a relationship with one of the Open Home Foundation boys, and they were in a relationship, and my wife was called in to counsel the whole family on the situation and how to best deal with it.
Ben Evans has left the church now, but at the time was married to the head social worker of Open Homes. He says not only did Pastor Edmonds and her husband Lee know about the alleged abuse, so did many others in the church. So Robin Edmonds and Lee Edmonds were well aware that their daughter was having a relationship with this 14-year-old.
Oh, certainly, and they were going through steps.
Allegations were also made that Robin Coughlin used her position within the Christian Foster Home Agency to have children placed in Destiny Church members' homes. It was also reported that the church was unsupportive in the wake of the abuse.
We tracked down the 14-year-old boy's mother. She confirmed the story. She says at the time she confronted Robin and Lee Edmonds, but they barely acknowledged her. The boy was living at a home run for at-risk kids, run by Pastor Edmonds and a man called Duke. He told me Rebecca regularly took the boy to a park for sex. And when the affair came to light, the teenager was beaten up by her husband. We visited the homes of the Edmonds families. The pastors had recently shifted out. The adult children were nowhere to be seen, absent since last Wednesday, the neighbours tell us. So we went to the church to talk to them. It's 10 o'clock on Sunday morning and we've come to Taranaki, to Destiny New Plymouth. We wanted to ask Pastor Robin Edmonds some questions. Surprisingly, the church is closed, and we've been told the men of Destiny have gone fishing in the Wairarapa. Another former member of the church told us of one other example. He remembers returning a runaway child to a foster home and witnessing physical abuse.
We took him back to the house, and the caregiver of the person booted him right up the gate, lifted him off the ground.
And another member told us Rebecca Noble was sent to Auckland to be counselled by Brian Tamaki.
Rebecca Noble was integrated into the Auckland Destiny Church, where she soon became heavily involved in active visible leadership alongside her husband, and they both remain there to this day. And Joshua Edmonds, whose charges related to sexual assault of a child even younger than Rebecca's alleged victim, is now the pastor of a church called Catch Fire Ministries. It was only when public outcry and pressure arose as a result of the Campbell Live investigation that Lee and Robin did decide to finally stand down from their roles as Destiny pastors. Even the Campbell Live reporter noted the lack of concern for the victims, with the focus appearing to be more about how the whole thing would affect Brian Tamaki.
The Open Home Foundation has asked for her resignation. We asked her whether she'd apologised to the young boy involved. She didn't respond to that question, but said she'd apologised to Brian Tamaki for any adverse effect the situation has had on him.
After the release of our previous Counterspin episode on this matter, I was contacted by a woman who provided a lot of information, including disturbing email evidence from Hannah Tamaki, about another child sex abuse case at a different Destiny Church location, that being Rotorua. The church leadership completely distanced themselves again and were unwilling to provide any support to the victim or the victim's family. We would love to present that evidence to you. However, the woman that contacted me has stated that that information and evidence is not to be shared, even if anonymised, partly because it may affect her position at her place of employment. That place of employment being the faith-based foster agency of Open Home Foundation in New Plymouth. The same branch where Robin Coughlin nee Edmonds worked, the New Plymouth Destiny pastor that we've just talked about, who was investigated by Campbell Live. In fact, this particular woman was handed Robin Coughlin's very job as Taranaki practice manager. So she shifted to New Plymouth and, in protection of her employer, hasn't spoken publicly of the devastating crimes ever since. Interestingly, she's also had input into the recent Abuse and Care Royal Commission of Inquiry, which specifically looks into abuse in faith-based institutions and agencies such as Open Home Foundation. So it's difficult to understand why she would be so unwilling to speak about the case at the Rotorua Destiny Church. She was directly affected in that case, a case that was so serious that it resulted in a sentence of 8 years prison time for the paedophile. This was a man who was given direct access to this child and many other children for a long period of time through his youth ministry leadership role at Rotorua Destiny Church. There are others I've spoken to who also hold information but are unwilling to come forward. As much as I understand, I personally find this to be an untenable position to hold when the safety of children is at stake. If we remain silent, we become complicit in the future abuse of children within the Destiny Church organisation. In response to the latest child sex scandal at Destiny Church, which the New Zealand Herald broke on the 26th of May 2024, a comment was placed under a Facebook post, a post that was made by a prominent Auckland Destiny Church leader, who's also the sister-in-law to the alleged offender. Counterspin Media can evidentially substantiate the story she referred to in its entirety, but as the woman who contacted me has effectively embargoed that evidence, I'm left to draw on independent sources to at least provide you with an overview. The author of this comment described a situation where a child was sexually abused by a kids' church leader who lived in a leader's home. She continued, referencing an ensuing conviction, saying, "It comes from the top." She also talked about how police checks were indeed not required for youth ministry, which can be confirmed with evidence to be the case until at least 2018. She made mention of how she knows of 3 separate situations of abuse of children in the church, how the victim or their family didn't receive any support from the church during the court procedure, also how when she approached Brian and Hannah Tamaki about the abuse, they met her with total denial, saying that in the church, we just forgive and move on. And again, rather than receiving any support from the church leader under whose post she was commenting, her comment was simply deleted and she was blocked. Counterspin Media is also in possession of credible and startling evidence provided to us by a social worker who was also a member and leader within the church. But unfortunately, she stated that this factual, compelling information is also not to be shared publicly. But what I can say is that I'm aware that Man Up members were permitted to work in children's ministry who had court orders against them which prohibited them from being in the vicinity of their own children who also attended that same children's church in Auckland. Although approached in an attempt to address this long-standing situation, the church leadership was completely unwilling to change the protocols of concern to protect those children. A harrowing campaign of psychological and even physical intimidation was then employed upon the lady who brought the concerns, but regrettably I'm forbidden from bringing you any further details around that. I'm also able to confirm that Man Up members were attending and supporting court cases in an effort to see children who had been removed from their parents returned to them, with an apparent disregard for the safety of the children involved. For example, one such case was seeking to have a man's children returned to him despite the fact that he had been found guilty of murdering a 3-year-old. For more historical context as to the endemic way that child sex abuse is constantly downplayed at Destiny Church, enter Eddie Long. 2010 was also the year that Eddie, Brian Tamaki's spiritual father, was accused of multiple counts of sexual abuse against young boys. One victim claimed he was coerced into sex with Long during his time at Auckland Destiny Church for a week-long conference in 2008. Soon after that trip, it was revealed that it was Long's MO to gather names and contact details of boys, then use the promise of gifts, favour and sonship to construct an environment that he could use to generate opportunities to meet with these boys privately. Here's Fox News, who caught up with one of the complainants in an impromptu interview in Atlanta in September 2010.
Jamal Paris is one of the 4 young men who have filed lawsuits against Bishop Long, accusing him of using scripture and church money to sexually seduce young men. Initially, he was reluctant to talk.
Dale Russell of Fox 5 News in Atlanta. Can we talk to you for a second?
Paris claims in his lawsuit the father-like figure used scripture to justify sex, and he lavished money, cars, jewelry, trips in the bishop's private jet, even homes for some teens, sometimes with funds from the church coffers.
You finally have a father that you've always wanted for and always dreamed of would just walk away from you if you don't give him what you want. So you end up turning into something you never thought you'd be. So while the media and the press and the rest of the people around the city or around the country look at us like, how can a grown man let another man touch him? What you have to understand is this man manipulated us from childhood. This was our father and we loved him. That's not a father. That's a predator. We would have to be the craziest kids in the world to want to come out and admit to another man touching on us publicly. To really believe this is about money would be absolutely ludicrous. How he left us hurt worse than anything I ever felt in my life. I cannot get the sound of his voice out of my head, and I cannot forget the smell of his cologne, and I cannot forget the way that he made me cry many nights when I drove in his cars on the way home, not able to take enough showers to wipe the smell of him off of my body.
Jamal Paris, near the end of our interview, said he wanted to speak directly to Bishop Eddie Long, and he turned to our camera to do so.
But that man cannot look me in my eye and tell me we did not live this pain, while you can sit in front of the church and tell them that you categorically deny it. You can't say that to our face, and you know this. You are not a man, you are a monster.
And then Jamal Paris got into his car and drove off into the night.
Eddie Long vowed to defend these allegations, but he didn't, instead opting to settle the claims against him for a sum of $24.8 million US. This in addition to the $40,000 a year each of the men were already receiving from the church before any charges were filed. Eddie was a preacher with a very prominent profile. Here he stands before the Bushes, the Clintons, Condoleezza Rice, and another bishop, Bishop T.D. Jakes, who's recently been accused of attending sex parties with Sean Diddy Combs that employed victims of sex trafficking. Like Tamaki, Long operated a school and a gym within his church property, and as he mixed with the children in the school and trained with the boys in the gym, he claimed that all he did was for the next generation. Understandably, in the US, news of the accusations against Long left many reeling, mainly because of the stark hypocrisy revealed from a man who, like Brian Tamaki, condemned homosexuality and presented himself as a driving force in the protection of children from sexual harm.
Let's listen to it in 48 seconds. We can squeeze it in. This is how we got here. The hypocrisy.
You cannot say, I was born this way. If you say you were born this way, then you're saying, God, you're a liar. And I see this thing down here, but I'm going to ignore it. That's the reason why we got sexual immorality. That's the reason why there's a rise in the gay agenda. You're out of order. You can be converted. Let me pray with you. Let me tell you, don't you be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed from the... Well, I don't know what I am. Johnny, take your clothes down and I'll show you who you are. You're still acting like the boys on the corner. God says you deserve death.
And that is why people are so livid at this minister, because of the hypocrisy. And then it comes out about this settlement, these claims against him for $24.8 million, according to this source.
You've been listening to...
When the accusations about Eddie Long were made, Brian Tamaki refused to address the parents in his church to ensure that no children had been approached or harmed during Long's recent week of interacting freely with the Boys of Destiny Church. To the contrary, after the dust finally settled, he invited Long back, greeting him with a porphyry at the airport and allowing him another full week of unsupervised access and interaction at Destiny, without so much as informing the parents of the allegations in settlements back in the US. Brian also ignored male survivors of sexual abuse who spoke up out of concern for the safety of the children inside Destiny Church, and he refused to answer any questions from the media on the matter. Soon after Eddie returned to Atlanta from that particular visit, he was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. Determined to lie all the way to the grave, he then tried to convince everyone that there was nothing wrong with him and that his drastic weight loss was because he had turned vegan. He said he had decided he was going to live to 100 years old and that he had never been healthier.
I said to my congregation, I'm going to live to be 100 years old, maybe add a few more years. But you know what? I wasn't going to get there stopping by Popeyes.
Despite Eddie Long's denials of ill health, only a couple of months after Eddie departed Auckland, the Tamakis travelled to Atlanta to spend time with him before he died just 3 months later. Since his death, the Tamakis have consistently refused to condemn Eddie Long's actions, with their church website for a long time continuing to describe Eddie as Brian's spiritual father. On June 6, 2024, Counterspin Media produced an exposé covering the new allegations of child sex abuse at Destiny Church, in which we talked about Eddie Long. Soon after that aired, the mother of Ford O'Connor, who's married to Brian Tamaki's granddaughter, posted a highlights reel to Facebook of Eddie Long's last trip to Destiny, in what could only be described as a pointed statement of contempt for anyone who would attempt to expose paedophilia within Destiny Church. She captioned it with a belligerent, "Losers don't get to dictate to winners."
Flesh, you are God being sent. Wherever you go, you take the full authority of the Almighty God and the kingdom, and every principality, every power has to bow because you come in the utmost authority of God. God has chosen you. I'm so sorry. This is no longer a church. This is a movement. This is a movement. This is a movement. This is the kingdom. The king is here. Welcome to the kingdom. Welcome to the kingdom. He has no home. We arise.
A Tamaki protege. Another self-proclaimed pastor with a history of abuse is a man by the name of Lincoln Russ. He frequently cites Brian Tamaki as his inspiration and role model, And in 2023, it was claimed that he was also imposing cult leader-style pressure on his followers, with reports of extreme emotional, psychological, financial and physical abuse, drug cultivation, and coercing his followers to take drugs with him, as well as posing as a woman to catfish men for money. Lincoln is a young man who was raised in the Movement Destiny Youth Program. Then there's the Javan Gulta connection. Long-term friends with the Tamakis, ex-PR guy for Destiny Church, and also the campaign manager for Hannah Tamaki's Vision Party. In 2023, it was revealed that Javan had been the PR guy for the disgraced homosexual sex abuser James Wallace, shortly before being employed by Brian Tamaki. In exchange for immunity from prosecution, Javan confessed in court to having played an active part in silencing the victims of James Wallace through bribes, threats and intimidation, even at one point discussing a plot to murder one of Wallace's victims who refused to be silenced. And finally, there are the latest allegations which were reported in the New Zealand Herald on the 26th of May 2024. The Herald article read, "A Destiny Church disciple has been stood down and a police investigation launched into allegations the man sexually abused youths in his care. The Herald understands that there are multiple alleged victims, with the alleged abuse spanning several years." As was the case with other historical sexual abuse scandals amongst his leadership, Brian Tamaki claimed to not know the man. In the New Zealand Herald article published on the 27th of May, and the 7th of June, and also the 18th of June, as well as on the 27th of May in his official statement addressing the scandal, Brian is quoted as saying, "I had nothing to do with this alleged offender. I don't even know him." However, as the accused was a speaker at a movement youth event all the way back in 2013, and as there are several posts from 2014 indicating that he was already beginning to move into leadership at that time, it appears the man has in fact been attending for well over a decade. And as we showed in the June 6 Counterspin expose, the photo in the Herald is one of many of them together that were taken inside Brian's own home. This next video shows the alleged offender at the Tamaki's home again, at a lunch with family and friends. Hannah Tamaki speaking from behind the camera.
"Oh, hello, Koro John. You have a nice trip away. Beautiful. No, well, that's the truth, eh? Pack up and head off again. Tell your wife." Did you do it? Very cool. Okay.
This photo is taken on another occasion at the Tamaki's home with members of Boys to Men, a group that the accused led for many years, which we'll take a deeper look at in a moment. This photo here again captures the two of them together, and the following clip shows footage of the accused ministering alongside Brian Tamaki. This photo of the alleged offender's hand shows that he wears a covenant ring, which is placed on the finger by Brian Tamaki in an up-close and personal ceremony. Those who wear this ring are always known to Brian. He calls them his spiritual sons. And here's the accused's mother, who was a prominent leader within Legacy, the women's version of Man Up. She was in leadership for many years. In fact, the whole family was heavily involved in the church for many years and were good friends with the Tamakis. The accused's brother held a starring role in the church. Head MC, head worship leader, basically the in-house rock star. Caleb was the head of Sound of Destiny, the church's music production group, which the accused was also a part of by 2014 at the latest. He was also very good friends with Brian, often declaring his love and devotion to him and the church, as he does here in these clips.
Hi, Bishop.
Hi, Bishop.
We love you.
We love you, Bishop.
I look forward to growing old in the house of destiny and with you and our people. I'm a son of this house. I'm a son of this ministry. When our man of God speaks, I have this mentality, or I have this mindset of, he's talking to me, he's talking to me. I constantly have people saying to me, man, I really love how you do this, or I really love how you do that. Far be it from me to ever hide away. Like our bishop says, a setback is a setup for a comeback. And under the DNA that we have in this house, under the word that we get, all you need to do is believe.
Making sure we all get a good long look at his covenant ring, he reminds us of the oath that he's made to never leave Brian or the church, as long as they both shall live. However, Caleb suddenly vanished from the church in November 2023 at exactly the same time the sexual abuse accusations were laid against his brother, leaving his wife and children behind and disappearing into the flames. In contrast to his almost daily posting about Destiny, he's now been absolutely silent about Destiny on social media ever since the allegations, preferring now to post this kind of content. Like other significant figures before him, such as Richie Lewis and many others, he was gone without so much as a goodbye and no explanation given. Brian Tamaki not only claims to not know Caleb's brother, the alleged offender, but he also claims to not know Ford O'Connor, his own grandson-in-law, who pleaded guilty to painting over the K Road pedestrian crossing. Ford was filmed talking about Brian's part in planning that event, which Brian claimed to know nothing about. And Brian was filmed talking about planning the Gisborne pedestrian crossing event, which he also claimed to know nothing about. Not only does Brian claim to not know the Destiny youth worker accused of sexually abusing boys within his own church, but he also claims that the accused was never in youth leadership in the church. His official statement reads, "The church never appointed this alleged offender as a Destiny Church youth ministry leader." And it also says, "Destiny Church has always held a staunch position that only healthy and wholesome married couples lead our youth work." I was a kids' church leader for about 3 years myself at Auckland Destiny. Not only was I not married, I was not even required to undergo a police check. The alleged offender was most definitely a youth ministry leader at Auckland Destiny Church. By 2014, he was a member of Sound of Destiny. By 2016, he was a Boys to Men leader. By 2017, he was a movement youth leader, which was the name for the group including both the boys and the girls. In 2017, he was actually named as the senior captain of Boys to Men. And in 2018, the Mangere Otahuhu Local Council named him as the head facilitator for Otahuhu Boys to Men, being of course the Destiny Church Boys Youth Group. There are more posts, and I could possibly include advertising Destiny youth events that he's named as facilitating. There are many photos of him on stage at Destiny, and many photos of him backstage at Destiny. He's included here in a 2018 album release post from Sound of Destiny. Mentioned as working with Destiny Productions here in 2018. In 2019, he's still being called the leader of Boys to Men. Here he is heading up another Boys to Men event in 2019. In this one from 2019, a mother says her son has been in the church a few years and the alleged offender has played a strong role in his life. By 2020, the accused had reached the level of regional head of Youth Nation South Auckland, which is the overarching name for the Destiny youth groups of differing ages. And later that year, this mother said her son has spent a few years under the alleged offender's mentorship at Destiny Church. By 2021, Destiny Youth Nation New Zealand called the alleged offender General, which is the highest leadership position in Destiny Youth Nation. And over the next couple of years, he was extremely active in his leadership role, and there are simply too many posts to include here. In 2022, we see another mum saying the accused has always played a big brother to her son, accompanied by a picture of Brian and Hannah with the alleged offender and his family. Here we see him overseeing the baptism of some of his boys to men boys at the Auckland Destiny Church premises. Again, in 2022, another mother is posting about how the accused is taking some boys away with him for a weekend out of town. October 22 shows a post from a parent talking about the amazing amount of time, commitment and energy that the accused has put into the Boys of Destiny Church over the many years. And in 2023, we see he was still being called General, the highest leadership position within Destiny Church Youth Nation. As I've shown, the alleged offender has been in prominent youth ministry at Destiny Church for at least 10 years. Yet Brian Tamaki claims that the church has never appointed him as a Destiny Church youth ministry leader at all. That he's had nothing to do with him and doesn't even know him. Also included in the May 26 Herald report was a description of how the alleged victims had become hostile towards women, turning on their mothers and acting like gang members. One mother said she had sought help from the church but had received no response, and that in fact Destiny had not even communicated with the parents since the abuse was reported back in November 2023. The alleged abuse took a terrible toll on the boys and their families. One mother explained that her son became suicidal in the aftermath of the abuse. Although Destiny didn't communicate with the parents, it is understood that they did secretly organise a meeting with the alleged victims, minors, without contacting the parents, making them aware, or seeking their permission. And Destiny's meeting with these alleged victims was held during the active police investigation. In Brian's official statement, published the day after the original May 26 Herald article, he wrote, "When this individual began attending another church in Counties Manukau, Destiny Church notified that church of the allegations against this individual." The new church that the individual began attending was Potter's House, again in South Auckland. Counterspin Media has evidence in our possession where the individual's pastor, as well as the national leader of Potter's House New Zealand, both confirm that the accused was in attendance at their church ever since leaving Destiny, and that they were completely unaware of the allegations against this man, as they had not received any communications from Destiny Church in any form at any time. They also claim that he was not running or even involved in any youth groups or ministries, contrary to Brian Tamaki's statement that he was. And this is consistent with any church's usual policy that a member would have to be in attendance for quite some time before they'd be able to work in youth ministry, let alone start a youth group. After the recent Counterspin expose on this matter, where we revealed that we held this evidence, Brian adjusted his message again. A new Herald article was published on the 18th of June, which quotes Brian Tamaki as saying, "We were informed last week this offender was operating another youth group under the name of a church, and when we contacted the pastor..." So, Brian is being quoted on the 18th of June as now saying that he informed the man's new church last week, so June 11th or later. But as I just showed you, he said he had already informed them in his original statement on the 27th of May, and he indicated that this had been done quite some time before the date of that statement. The new article also read, Tamaki alleged the man had been attending multiple other churches during the months-long investigation. As I showed you earlier, his official statement indicated that it was only one church, but now it's multiple churches. And if he did indeed pass through multiple churches in only 6 months, surely this would not have given him the time to launch and operate a youth group. And how could he have attended multiple churches if he was at Potter's house the entire time, as the Potter's house pastor claimed, considering their services are held at the same day and time as other churches? This new article on the 18th of June also published another of Tamaki's adjustments that he had recently posted on social media, where he said that it was Destiny Church who notified the police in November 2023. However, the first Herald article on the matter, on the 26th of May, the second article on the 27th of May, and the third on the 7th of June all clearly stated that it was the mother of one of the alleged victims who alerted the police, who then, in turn, notified Destiny Church. It must also be questioned why Brian would write in an X post a couple of days after the first Herald article that the police found a sexual abuser, if it was actually Destiny Church who had found him and notified the police. It is my personal opinion that the Herald now appears to be holding back from reporting the full truth of the situation. The article on the 18th of June showed concerning indicators of being an attempt to clean up any damage that may have been done to Tamaki's reputation from previous articles. It said, after the Herald broke the story last month, Tamaki took to social media to respond to the allegations, saying his heart went out to any alleged victims and their families. However, Brian's official statement, released the day after the first Herald article, didn't express any concern for the victims. And neither did the one he posted the following day on X. In fact, none of the multiple alleged victims were even mentioned. Yet again, in the new article, the Herald went on to reiterate Brian's statement that he's had nothing to do with the alleged offender and that he doesn't even know him. Being a journalistic agency, why would the Herald not present the obvious evidence to the contrary, just like we did in our expose? I know for a fact that the Herald was trawling social media in regards to this case, as they contacted someone I know in response to a comment that they'd made on Facebook. Lane also told me that he wanted to speak to me, but he didn't follow through. Why wouldn't a journalist pursue contact with someone who could provide him with information? Also interesting, when I rang the courts to ask for the usually public information about the time and courtroom for the recent plea hearing, I was told by the operator that they'd been instructed by the judge not to give out any information on the case, including hearing times or locations. And then there was no report whatsoever from any media outlet regarding the outcome of the 24th of June hearing or the plea entered, which is most unusual. It's not a secret that our media agencies are controlled and are allowed to go so far but no further. Then they can say they did cover the story, it wasn't buried. They did their duty. When the truth is, they reported the bare minimum, and often in a very skewed way. They didn't so much investigate the story as they did manage the story. It is worthy of note too that no one, including the New Zealand Herald, is ever willing to highlight Counterspin Media's information. They stay well away from the comprehensive fact-finding investigation that we've freely placed into public domain. Instead, they choose certain narratives that would make it seem like an isolated incident, when instead it's looking very much like it may well be part of a much larger problem within Destiny Church. As always, Counterspin Media receives the highest form of censorship, which is total blackout. We take that as a compliment because it shows they cannot debunk us and have no option but to try desperately to ignore us. Just as they did when we brought information regarding Brian Tamaki's close relationship with George Ngatai and about the collaboration that recently saw Destiny Church receive huge profits, many millions of dollars, from the bioweapon disguised as a vaccine. Something that's now provable through COVID payout data. George Ngatai's position as co-chair of the Māori Council, as well as Brian's many other connections to guys like Honi Harawera and Gulta, of course, who's now been promoted to Managing Director of the Māori Carbon Foundation, despite no knowledge or experience in that field, to guys like John Tamahiri and Willie Jackson and many other pillars of the so-called Māori elite, and his relationship as cousin to the Māori king, all provide strong illustration of what we at Counterspin have been saying for a long time. There is no separation between church and state. That doesn't begin and end with Destiny either. It extends to other megachurches especially. Peter Mortlock of Auckland City Impact Church has been firmly partnered with Tamaki in his globalist puppet pursuits for many years. He can often be found right alongside Tamaki, pushing globalist narratives under a thin veneer of Christianity. And just like Tamaki, he's done very well for himself. He lives a life of extreme wealth and luxury. Like Tamaki, he owns a fleet of vehicles. He sold one of his homes for $1.8 million back in 2014, and just last year he sold another of his properties for more than $10 million. Back in 2007, Ian Wishart revealed an interconnected, clandestine web of debauchery in an investigation entitled To Serve and Protect. It revealed an extensive and horrific high-level child sex abuse, bestiality and drug ring, and how Helen Clark's government ran cover for it, and how the media of the day was prevented from reporting the information they held. Let me read Wishart's introduction. Explosive new allegations of widespread police sexual misconduct reaching as high as the current Police Commissioner Howard Broad have emerged in a major Investigate magazine inquiry into police corruption, along with evidence of a political cover-up by senior Labour politicians, including the current Attorney General Michael Cullen and SIF's Minister David Benson Pope. Interesting to note, the tendrils of involvement extended all the way to many church leaders, and many with strong socialist and communist connections. If you believe that the deviants and paedophilic psychopaths are all hanging out in Switzerland, Ukraine, the Vatican and the White House, and that this kind of state-sanctioned abuse isn't happening right here in New Zealand, you might want to take a look at Ian Wishart's investigation. We've seen evidence that could point to Brian Tamaki being a paid puppet of the state. Is there some sort of government protection going on here? It would explain why the Rotorua Destiny Children's Church leader, who went to prison for 8 years for his crimes of paedophilia within the church, was not even reported in the media. Brian put out a news statement on the 10th of July in reaction to a notification from the Herald that a new article was about to come out. He included a small but important message adjustment of the alleged offender was not a Destiny Church leader, perhaps as a result of Counterspin's undeniable evidence in our exposé that he was definitely a youth leader. In that statement, he added, the victim is also deeply concerned that Lane Nichols and his reporting will interfere in the victims receiving the justice they seek against the alleged offender, as this reporter continually interferes in the due court process. So Brian Tamaki deems a journalist reporting the facts as interfering in the due court process. I don't see any basis for that statement, and I'm sorry, but I don't buy that this concern is truly even coming from a victim. Where's the evidence for that? I mean, there's not exactly been a great track record of truth-telling thus far. No, I believe that Brian published this because he knew another complainant was about to come forward. As he said in that statement, Lane had just contacted him to notify him about that. And then in another extraordinary display of gaslighting, Brian went on to write that Lane Nichols is hell-bent on lying about him in Destiny Church, attempting to slate his name and the good works of the church, there's that white knighting again, due to his extreme hatred. And then he goes on to call a very plain, factual report, which he hadn't even seen because it hadn't yet been published, a hit piece. So instead of supporting public awareness of this alleged offender and supporting the protection of future victims, he again framed it as persecution against him. Here's the piece he's referring to, which came out the following day on the 11th of July. They simply tell us that another complainant has come forward, and that the 6 charges the alleged offender was facing have now increased to 14. It's now been revealed that Kiwa Hamiora, former general of the entire Destiny Youth Nation, has now admitted to hundreds of assaults upon the boys in his care. It's been reported that following meetings that were organised through Destiny Church, the young victims would be invited back to the house that he co-owns and shares with his mother, Trish Hamiora, of the Destiny Legacy movement. Some of the victims had even been living in this house for years, in a strikingly similar scenario to the victims of the New Plymouth Destiny sexual abuse. This is going the way of Eddie Long, where more and more victims will come out of the woodwork and, yes, Brian will do all he can do to discredit anyone who reports on it and brings the facts to the public. Meanwhile, he'll continue to tell you that he's the one standing up for the protection of children, while at the same time attempting to defame people like Lane Nichols, who's simply doing his job, just as they've done to me in the past, and will probably do again after this video. But bring it on, I say, because what you've just seen is by no means an exhaustive list. There are many others with stories of sexual assault, of grooming, of inappropriate behaviour. But as I've explained earlier, I know from speaking with some of them that these people don't want to go public for personal reasons, such as how it may affect their job or how it could put them in danger. But if you are one of those people, ask yourself, would you or did you walk from your job to avoid the jab to protect yourself, like so many others did? Well, what's justice for these children worth to you? What's the protection of future victims worth to you? Is it not more than a career, a reputation, or a cherished position within the church? I know it's costly, but we must be prepared to lay it all on the line when it comes to the protection of our most valuable treasure, which is without a doubt our children.